Hello, and welcome to the House of Law. Tonight, we begin with something ancient, quiet, and filled with meaning passed through generations. We begin with the totem. In this bedtime journey, we'll gently explore what totems are, how they have shaped human connection to nature, spirit, and ancestry. A soft invitation before we begin. If you feel peace in these quiet stories, feel free to like this channel. Subscribe for more restful journeys. And if you know someone who seeks calm, feel free to share this with them too. Now, let's settle in. A totem, at its heart, is a symbol. You might have heard the word before, perhaps in stories or whispered in history books, but what is a totem really? It represents a bond between people and the natural world. In many traditions, this bond is so deep that it ties a person or an entire group of people to a particular animal, plant, or sometimes even an object or force. A totem can be a bear, strong and steady, or an eagle, watching from the sky. It might be a tree, ancient and rooted, or the river, moving, gentle, enduring. But a totem is more than a symbol alone. It carries meaning, it carries memory, and it carries the spirit of connection. Totems have been known across the world, not just in one place or one belief. In North America, many indigenous nations weave totems into their cultural stories and family lines. These are not idols, not worshipped as gods, but storytellers themselves, carved with images of clan animals, ancestors, and tales of survival and spirit. Each figure on the pole holds meaning. People recognize themselves through these symbols. They say, "This is where I come from. This is who I am." Across the Pacific, in the lands of Australia, Aboriginal peoples have rich traditions of totemic belief as well. Among the Haida, the Tlingit, and the Tsimshian peoples, tall wooden totem poles stand at village edges. Here, a totem may be called a personal dreaming. Given at birth or through ceremony, it might be a kangaroo, a snake, a star, or even the rain. In this understanding, the totem is both protector and elder, guiding a person's walk through life. It links them to their ancestors, the land, and the song lines that carry the memory of the earth. In Africa, too, traditions flow with the idea of totems. Among the Shona people of Zimbabwe, each clan has its own totem animal. There are lions, monkeys, fish, even insects. A totem passes down through family lines, and with it comes taboos and respect. Often, to eat your own totem animal is forbidden, seen as a dishonor to the spirit that guards your clan. In this way, these symbols are not only spiritual, but also ethical, guiding behavior and encouraging care. Totems appear in Asia as well, though often in woven ways. In China and Mongolia, dragons, phoenixes, and tigers have long served as symbolic protectors of families, villages, and dynasties. These creatures are as much spiritual as mythological, and they tether communities together through belief and story. In ancient Japan, certain families believed they descended from divine beings or spirits of nature, like wolves, or cranes, or even foxes. The idea of being watched over by a powerful animal is a quiet thread running through many human cultures. It is not always about worship, but about belonging, about understanding your place in a larger world, a living world, and feeling guided, even when the path is deep and winding. Totems may be chosen or inherited. Some are celebrated in ceremonies. Others are spoken quietly from elder to child. Some families carry the same totem for hundreds of years. Others might find their totem revealed through dreams or moments of clarity beneath stars. But always, the totem brings meaning. It is a reminder that no one walks alone, that something greater walks beside you, or perhaps within you. Symbols are soft things, but they carry weight in a world that often feels formless. The totem offers shape, story, and stillness. It says, "This is where I root myself. This is the spirit that walks with me." And in that gentle assertion, it offers peace, whether carved in wood, whispered in ceremony, painted on cave walls, or tucked quietly into dream. The totem remains a constant companion of human spirit, softly watching, quietly guiding. Long ago, in the quiet spaces between earth and sky, there formed a connection between people and the world around them. Not just a connection of need or survival, but one of reverence, memory, identity. This is the genesis of totemism. At its heart, totemism describes a way of seeing the world, where every tree, every creature, every stone and stream is a part of the extended family of life. Across centuries and continents, this idea took root in many forms. In moments of ceremony or in the daily rhythm of life, it helped tell people who they were and where they belonged. Let us begin in the grasslands and sacred forests of Africa. In many African communities, certain families or clans identify deeply with an animal, not merely as a symbol, but as an ancestor, a protector, or a mirror of their character. Among the Bantu-speaking peoples, you may find a family whose totem is the leopard. They do not hunt it, nor eat it, not out of fear, but out of respect. To them, the leopard may embody quiet strength, patience, and courage in the shadows. These associations are not written in books. They live in stories told beside firelight, in songs passed from mother to child, and in the shared silence during a distant animal's cry. A different example lies in the lands of Oceania. Vast island networks where the ocean breathes life into every breath and movement. In places like Papua New Guinea, clans often inherit totems from their ancestors, not just animals, but plants, weather, or even sacred stones. A clan may trace its origin to a bird, like the cassowary, a fierce and elusive creature of the forest. It serves as both myth and memory, a guardian of history, and a reminder of kinship with the land. In some traditions, people believe they share an essence with their totem, so hurting the totem would be like harming a relative. Each encounter with nature is a moment of kinship, not conquest. In North America, among the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest, towering totem poles rise like memories carved into wood. These poles do not merely serve as decoration. They are stories made visible. A raven carved near the top may recall the tale of how light came into the world. A bear may symbolize a family line, passed down through generations. Each figure is a whisper from the past and a promise to the future. Now and then, we may wonder how these traditions could be so far apart, and yet echo with the same notes. This is the quiet truth of totemism. It speaks to something deep and universal. The idea that we do not walk alone in the world, that the winds and creatures and hills around us are not other but kindred. They remind us who we are, not by reflection, but by relation. To be part of a lineage that includes wolf and whale, tree and thunder, brings a very different kind of comfort, not one from ownership, but from belonging. You see, beneath all the symbols and carvings, there lies something simple, a belief that we are not merely observing nature, we are within it. They remind us of a world that feels instead of functions, listens instead of explains. And in the soft glow of that older understanding, we find rest. Totemism is a word that has traveled a long and winding path, and 19th centuries, connected not just by biology, but by story, ritual, memory. Totems endure, not by resisting change, but by staying rooted in what is always true. It was used to describe a spiritual and social system found among many indigenous cultures around the world, but especially, and with unique depth, in the native North American traditions. These early observers, from outside the cultures they studied, often did not fully understand what they saw. They recorded rituals, stories, symbols carved in wood, painted on hides, worn in dance or war, and they gave the name totemism to what they perceived as belief in sacred animals or plants that protected a group of people. But the truth, like the forest that shelters the tree, is far more complex than the word might suggest. In many native North American tribes, a totem is not just a symbol, it is a living relationship. A story passed from breath to breath, from heart to heart. It connects a person or clan to a specific animal, plant, or natural force, not as an object of worship, but as an ancestor, a helper, a guide. Some anthropologists later began to refine their views. They noticed the deep role totems played in defining a family's lineage. Totems were not chosen, they were inherited, passed through generations, like a river that remembers its source. Totemic identity shaped social rules. Who one could marry, what customs one followed, what stories one was entrusted to tell. It was more than belief, it was belonging. In the Tlingit and Haida cultures of the Pacific Northwest, each clan is associated with specific totem animals, the raven, the eagle, the wolf. These creatures are not just emblems, they are kin. And the tall totem poles carved from cedar speak the language of stories and ancestry. Spirituality, too, moves gently beneath the roots of totemism. Shamans in many native cultures called upon their totemic spirits in dreams and visions. In healing ceremonies or quests for wisdom, they sought connection, harmony, the weaving of the seen and unseen worlds. For the Ojibwe, their term Dodem means clan, and also refers to their animal totems. The bear, the crane, the loon, each had its role. Protector, speaker, wise one, and shamanic practice often involved journeying, inwardly, through guided meditation or vision-seeking. The totem animal might appear in these inner landscapes, not as a symbol, but as a living teacher. These were not simple categories or identities. They were ways of moving through the world, of understanding one's place in the web of life. In many native beliefs, everything has spirit. The trees, the waters, the stones, animal totems were part of that living spirit world, intertwined with human fate. So while the word totemism may have its roots in outsider language, The truths it tries to describe are older, deeper, and often still whispered softly, through stories told by firelight, through dances under the moon, through carvings that remember the names of ancestors. Totemism is not just a belief system, it is a path of relationship, a way to walk in kinship with the world. And in the next quiet moment, if you listen closely, you might feel the presence of the totem animals. Not in the sounds, but in the silence between them. They do not need words. Their voices are remembered in the wind, the roots, and the heart. Totem poles, tall, weathered, and silent, yet they speak volumes through the hands that carve them. Among the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Northwest coast, totem poles are more than art. They are storytellers, guardians, and memory keepers. The tradition of carving these poles spans back generations, passed down through families and nations that trace their lineage deep into the forested coasts of what we now know as British Columbia and Alaska, as well as the shores of Washington and northern Oregon. The Haida, Tlingit, Tinshian, and Kwakwaka'wakw peoples each have their own customs, symbols, and meanings surrounding totem poles, and within each carving, the beliefs and values of the carver's community are etched like whispers carried by the wind. The towering structure of a totem pole begins in the forest, from the trunk of a mighty tree, almost always the western red cedar. This tree is chosen for many reasons, not just for its size or soft grain that yields to carving tools, but for the relationship these peoples have with the land and its gifts. Among the tall cedars, a carver walks with care, listening, observing, not to cut for convenience, but to find the tree that speaks. Once chosen, ceremonies may follow, thanking the spirit of the tree and the forest for its offering, acknowledging that something living is becoming, something lasting. The process is deliberate, meditative, without hurry. Each figure carved upon the pole has meaning. Some recall ancestors, others represent spirits and crest animals of the family or clan. Ravens, eagles, bears, wolves, the sea otter, and the orca. Each animal drawn not just from nature, but from mythology. The tree is brought back to the village and laid down gently, where it will slowly take on a new shape beneath the hands of the carver and their apprentices. The style of each pole may vary between nations, some carved with wide-open eyes, some with hands folded inward, some following older customs, and others blending influences new and old. There are many kinds of totem poles. The most common is the house frontal pole, placed at the entrance of a family home, welcoming guests and identifying the clan through carved heraldry. Inside, one might find interior house poles too, which support the roof beams, carved just as carefully to remind those inside of the lineage that holds them together. Then there are memorial poles, created in honor of someone who has passed. These poles preserve memory across generations, holding names, faces, and tails in the patterns of wings, paws, and eyes. Another kind are mortuary poles, which are more rare today, but once held the remains of honored clan members within a box placed high near the top. Some poles are raised to ridicule, also called shame poles, erected to bring attention to unpaid debts, misconduct, or false claims. Though few and far between, they served a social function, using public memory to restore balance along the beaches, near river outlets, or at the edge of a village clearing. Totem poles once stood in rows, casting long shadows at sunrise and golden glows at dusk. They were never permanent by design, no protective sealant or roof, only the cedar, the elements, and the passage of time. This impermanence is part of the tradition. One day, the pole will fall and return to the earth, and when it does, it is not destroyed, but completed. The carvers know this when they begin. They carve with humility, knowing their work, though touched with sacred memory, is not meant to last forever. But while it stands for many. Stories lived, stories told, and some stories still being written. A totem pole is never just a piece of art. It is a layered expression, told through hands that have long known the grain and breath of cedar. Behind every pole stands a lineage, a quiet rhythm of teaching and learning, passed from master carver to devoted apprentice. These figures, towering and still, begin their journey not in isolation, but surrounded by the gentle murmur of stories, voices of elders guiding the tools, and songs rising with the scent of fresh shaved bark. The carver, often an elder in the community, holds more than a chisel in hand. They carry memory, responsibility, and the quiet patience of the forest. Their apprentices watch, listen, and wait. There are no fast lessons here, only time, repetition, and reverence. A young apprentice might begin by preparing the tools, warming the stone, or sanding the surface. The master never rushes. Each curve and cut is deliberate, each motion an echo of those before, every creature that takes shape, every form that rises from the cedar carries meaning. Sometimes ancestral, sometimes personal, always sacred. And there is the ceremony. Before. And there is the ceremony. Before. A pole is begun. A ritual prepares both the wood and its makers. They are told the stories not once, but many times, each layer soaking inward, as sure as oil into wood grain. The community may gather, or it may be private, but always there is spirit present. The wood is smudged, cleansed with cedar smoke or song or both. Some say the tree itself must be asked, for even in death the cedar carries life. A quiet connection is made between people and tree, between past and present. Then, and only then, does the carver touch knife to wood. As days pass into weeks, and weeks flow into seasons, the pole begins to emerge. The faces breathe from the log. Symbols rise between knots. Apprentices learn to hear the rhythm of the knife. Gentle pressure echoed in the wood's response. The tools are blessed. Hands are steadied, and intentions are set. They learn where to yield and where to hold firm. The entire process is a kind of conversation, not with words, but with memory, skill, and deep intention. A totem pole is not finished when the carving ends. Before it stands tall, it must be awakened. Another ceremony completes the circle. Offerings may be made, like salmon, cedar branches, or songs. W saw. Stories are spoken aloud, so they rest within the lines of the pole. On. And the pole is raised not in silence, but with great care and unity. The apprentices, once silent, now speak. They have learned the language, passed to them slowly, with hearts open and hands poised. Through the carver's eyes, the pole becomes not just a story shared, but a spirit remembered. And so the lineage continues. Voices in the forest, kept alive through wood and will. Totems speak, not with words, but with shape, form, and color. They stand in stillness, quietly narrating the long story of those who came before, of spirits seen and felt, of the animals who guided paths through forest and dream. Look closer, and you will see that every figure carved, every symbol painted, carries a voice. These are not decorations, they are storytellers. In many cultures, totems represent something more than a family or tribe. It whispers of vision, protection, and the clarity to see what others might not. A bear's broad form might speak of strength, but carved in wood. It carries the memory of ancestors who guarded their kin through winters of silence. Each animal tells part of the tale. Each spirit holds its place. They depict the essence of bonds, connections between people, animals, and the spirit realm. An eagle at the peak of a pole does not only tell of sharp eyes and wide wings. There are ancestors who walk beside the panther, spirits who ride with the raven, their guidance translated into shape and hue. Some figures are tender and rounded, others jagged and angular. This is not random design. Each style tells of the being it honors. Even the order matters. Totemic carvings often follow the oral lineages they reflect. Elder spirits below, new guardians above. And then, there is color. A deep red might suggest courage, the force that moved warriors forward. Black may symbolize the unknown spirit world, a quiet place of power. Blue tells of sky and water, dreams and clarity, each hue paired with purpose. And when motifs blend, when spirals wrap around talons, when patterns stitch the winds across wings, it is the invisible being stitched into visible presence. Eyes might be wide in wonder, or narrowed in discernment. There is a language in the motions too. A beak turned east, a claw reaching down, the placement itself, carefully chosen. The eye of a thunderbird does not merely watch, it remembers. And here, at the intersection of symbol and spirit, a language unfolds. It is quiet, yes, but not silent. It asks you to slow your gaze and listen with your whole body. Totems are not just seen, they are felt. And there, stories, older than paper, still live. Some scholars have called these designs decorative, but the artisans say otherwise. They are the coded breath of ancestral voice, the flame of memory held within wood grain. They live in the way the morning light falls on a carved ridge, in the echo behind the raven's call, in the hush between footsteps at the base of a pole. Every line is a thread, and every thread weaves a spirit. Not fiction, but belonging. Not history, but continuity. In this house of lore, totems do not merely decorate the corners. They speak, they remind, they invite. And as you drift, let their symbols settle gently into your own dreaming. Shapes become echoes, colors become whispers. The story continues. But softly now, they are more than wood and pigment, more than the figures shaped by careful hands. Totems are memory, held close by those who continue traditions, and pass them gently from one generation to the next. Each animal or symbol speaks to a story, a lesson, a lineage, every curve in. The wood is a whisper from long ago. In symbols, we find the oldest voices still speaking. In the stillness of everyday life, totems watch quietly, unblinking and ever-present. Within the homes of many families, and at gathering places under open skies, totems stand as guides. In the rhythms of daily life, they appear like old friends, maybe at the entrance of a house, or nestled in a corner where the morning light rests, maybe as a pendant worn near the heart, reminding the wearer of the eagle's watchfulness or the bear's quiet strength. Totems do not shout. They remind us who we are, even when we forget, even when time presses forward and memory grows quiet. They listen. They remain. In some communities, a person belongs to a specific clan. Their identity shaped by shared ancestry and sacred stories passed through their totem. When a child is born, they are gently welcomed into their clan's embrace, with the totem marking that bond. A carved figure rests by the crib. A song might be whispered of the raven, or wolf, or salmon. They learn, not just who they are, but who came before them. Carved figures lining the family house might show generations of ancestors, not only in image, but in spirit. A person tracing their fingertips along a totem can feel those silent voices, etched deep into the woodbine. Hands long gone. Simple moments like this are the roots of belonging. And as the child grows, it is not just heritage, it is living memory. In community gatherings, storytellers stand near the tall poles and speak in soft cadence. Their words match what the poles already say, though the wood does not speak aloud. The figures stacked one on top of another. Animals, shapes, spirits. Each echoes a tale of survival, of unity, of mystery. And so, totems are more than reflections of an older world. They are instruments of it. Alive in daily life, alive in the roles that people play within their clans and circles. They guide behavior, mark responsibility, offer protection. A healer may wear the symbol of the frog, known for its connection to water and cleansing. A leader may be of a Thunderbird clan, carrying the weight of vision and transformation. These connections are not just symbolic, they are lived, felt, carried in silence and strength. When a person moves through their world with their totem close, they remember their place in the larger story. The carvings do not say everything, but they say enough. Enough to still the heart just for a moment, enough to remind that you are never alone in your skin, that others came before you, and they are still here, in the wood, in the stories, in the quiet corners of the day. This is the whisper of ancestry, a soft hand on your shoulder from across time, living closely with a totem, was never limited to quiet, personal reflection. In the world of old rhythms and slow turnings, ceremonies took place beneath the open sky, where smoke rose in spirals and embers glowed like the eyes of silent ancestors. Community events, no matter how simple or sacred, were guided by the voice of the totem. Not a loud voice, not one spoken aloud by stone or carving. The totem's presence reached into every fold of village life, like a thread gently pulling the fabric of people together, but a voice carried gently by the elders. It always began with a story, Children gathered close, eyes wide and limbs still, as the tale of the totems spilled into the evening air. Stories of how the crow brought wisdom from the dark woods, or how the salmon gave itself to nourish the people. These were the touchstones, the teachings wrapped within feather and scale. When a child came of age, an initiation would blend that child's spirit with the path of the totem, through quiet walks beneath ancient trees or silent nights wrapped in smoke and starlight. "Your totem is the owl," they might say, watchful and patient. Or perhaps it was the wolf, quiet in strength and rich in loyalty. With that naming came a subtle shift in the child's place within the village. No longer only a son or daughter, but also a bearer of the totems. Bath. In marriage, too, the totem remained ever near. Before vows were spoken, the elders would sit in silence, feeling the air between two people. Each carried a totem spirit within them, and the balance between those spirits mattered deeply. A hawk and a river otter could live together, well, one seeing above, one flowing below. The elders would watch, would wait, until the right moment arrived. Then, often without ceremony yet full of meaning, they would say what the signs had whispered all along. The quiet pride in one's chest was not the pride of conquest, but belonging. But sometimes the totems warned of imbalance. Two bears, both strong and restless, might clash too often. The elders never forbade, but they would gently guide. They spoke like the leaves, never pushing, only rustling. Often, those entering marriage would offer gifts to one another, carved symbols of each totem. The giving meant understanding. It meant, "I see your spirit, and walk with it alongside mine." When conflict stirred the soil of the community, the totem was asked to steady what had grown uneven. Two people in dispute might sit across the fire. Between them would rest a bundle of items tied to their shared totem lineage. A single feather, a bone tool, perhaps just a stone worn smooth by generations. And with those quiet symbols, their hearts were brought back to a deeper memory, not of who was right or wrong, but who they were, together. Often, speaking would come slowly. There could be tears, or just long silences. And then, a question from an elder. Not one seeking blame, but wisdom. What would your totem ask of you now? After that question came stillness. A moment to let the answer rise, not from the mind, but from the deeper roots. And just like that, more often than not, the spirit of peace would return. The totem was not a judge, but a reminder, a keeper of balance in the hush between actions. Through all of life's meanderings, the totem sat quietly in the center, never demanding, only offering its shape to the way ahead. Fur. Totem poles, rising tall against the sky, are more than just wood and pigment. They are stories made visible, ancient voices carved in cedar, songs passed through time. In many indigenous cultures of the Pacific Northwest, the potlatch ceremony marked the moment when a totem pole would first touch the air. The potlatch is not simply a gathering. It is a sacred event, a declaration of identity, a sharing of wealth and remembrance. It happens in rhythm with the seasons, guided by the ebb and flow of the natural world. No one rushes the making of a totem pole. Often, the selection of the tree itself is a spiritual act. The tree, usually red cedar, is chosen with careful prayer and reverence. Once carved, the pole becomes a physical story. It tells of ancestry, of achievements, of trials, and of the connections between earth, sea, and sky. When the pole is ready to rise, the people gather. Families join with neighboring clans. Elders prepare songs, and food is shared from morning to night. The act of raising the totem is both a celebration and a ritual. It binds the community in shared purpose. And at its heart is the potlatch, a ceremonial feast that echoes far beyond the village. The potlatch is a time out of ordinary time. It brings the spiritual into the present. Names are given, elders honored, and sometimes spirits acknowledged. The pole itself may house more than memory. It may serve as a bridge between worlds. The eyes carved into the wood, shaped like ovals turned on their sides, gaze out over the land. They are meant to see both the living and the unseen. Some say they protect. Others say they guard the stories within. In the cycle of seasons, the potlatch often comes at a turning point, a time when salmon return or when the moon glows full during the long nights. These are not coincidences. The people feel the rhythm of the earth, and the sacred is always near, not apart from life, but fully woven into it. Children play near the poles. Their laughter dances lightly in the air as elders share legends by firelight. There is no line dividing story and truth, or spirit and day. It all belongs together. To live with the totem is to live inside the great web of meaning. Even as the paint fades and moss takes root, the stories remain, echoes in cedar, invitations to remember. And as each season turns, the people listen. They raise their eyes, and they gather once more. There is a quiet rhythm to the land, a soft turning of earth's breath that no clock could ever fully capture. Time speaks not only in days and minutes, but in moments stitched together by wind, light, and return. Season by season, nature reshapes itself, painting the forests and skies with stories older than memory. Many of these stories are kept in a place you can touch, a place shaped from ancient timber, carved with care, and held high against both sky and season, the totem pole. Often, we think of it as a symbol, a monument for a culture, or a marker of lineage. But look closer, listen longer, and something deeper begins to emerge. These tall wooden pillars, weathered but unwavering, carry within them a record far more intricate than names. They carry time, not the kind you measure in years, but in wings soaring south, in salmon swimming upstream, in snowfall coating cedar. Each figure along the pole tells a story, not just of people, but of what unfolds around them and within them. The raven at the top may not just speak of creation, but of return, of the time when the darkness begins to give way to light. The bear, carved thick and grounded, may tell of harvest, the season of gathering before stillness. And the whale, deep and moving, can signal migration, immense cycles drawn by cold and current alike. These forms are not placed at random, nor are they static in meaning. They move in spirit, just as seasons move in sky and soil. Some communities speak of 4 seasons, others speak of many more, each a stage in a larger song, carried by the animals that travel with it. When the geese begin their long flight overhead, their V-shaped patterns piercing the clouds, it is said they trace spirit roads in the sky, showing the way the soul travels as well. These are not just birds in flight, they're timekeepers with wings. The salmon run, a surge upstream, against current and stone. It signals not only breeding, but beginnings, a time of nourishment, of roots soaking in richness left behind in the wake of sacrifice. And when certain blossoms open, or when moss softens a certain stretch of bark, it marks more than a new month. It signals the rise of medicines and the shifting needs of body and spirit. Totem poles quietly hold this understanding. Their figures act as memory, not just for people, but for the world that moves around them. Like a calendar, but made of spirit and weather, they do not forget. Even when the world around them tries to hurry forward, they remember the stillness before snow, the hours when everyone gathers close. They remember the hum of bees in long sunlight, the dance of leaves along autumn ground, and in remembering, they teach us how to move, gently, responsively, together. As seasons turn and animals move in kind, so too does spirit shift within the human heart. There are times when we rise, when the heat of summer fills our limbs with purpose and strength. And there are times to curl inward, when the mist wraps around the trees, whispering rest. The totem pole mirrors these sacred patterns. Some poles show birth stories at their base, and journeys of growth climbing ever upward. Others reflect seasonal roles, guardians of rain, guides of spring hunt, watchers for the wind. They are not just carved once and left to stand. They are visited, spoken to, re-understood as each year unfolds. Over time, a figure might take on new meaning, not because the truth has changed, but because we have. In this quiet revision, the totem remains alive. Living wood, sacred lines, bookmarks in the story of a people and the lands that hold them. The animals, the seasons, the elders, all keep the rhythm, all keep time, and the pole remains watchful, listening. The totem pole, a silent sentinel, standing in place for generations, carved by careful hands, guided by stories passed down through time. Each figure along the pole holds meaning, not just for those who created it, but for all who stand in its shadow, listening softly to the messages hidden in the grain. Let us start with the bear. Strong, protective, closely tied to the land and its rhythms. The bear is often carved low on the pole, close to the earth, where its paws might rest just above the base. This placement is not random. It echoes the bear's grounded nature. Its role as a guardian, a provider, and a symbol of strength in solitude. When carved with its mouth open, it may signify a spoken warning or a shared lesson. When shown curled or seated, it is resting, watching, still very much aware. Next comes the eagle, feathers sweeping wide even in wood, its wings drawn back or outstretched depending on the style. The eagle sees what others cannot. It flies closest to the spirit world, its sharp eyes searching over both land and soul. Because of this, the eagle is often found near the top of totem poles, a messenger between realms, its position allowing it to watch both earth and sky. Its cry, imagined in wood through open beak and lifted feathers, calls not only to people, but to the spirits beyond. Then there is the wolf, loyal, perceptive, both part of the pack and yet deeply individual. The wolf may be carved mid-pole, rooted below the eagle. But above the bear, forming a bridge between ground and sky, it speaks of connection, of guidance, of instinct. The wolf follows paths unseen, and in some stories, it is the figure that leads the way home. Each animal, every mark of the chisel, weaves spirit into symbol. Where they are placed matters. Top does not always mean greater. Bottom does not mean lesser. Sometimes it simply reflects the order of the story. A tale might begin with the trickster and end with the noble. It might start in the heavens and land gently upon the riverbank. The pole's figures are read from bottom to top, or top to bottom, depending on the tradition of the people who carved them. Some totem poles are family stories. Others mark a clan's crest or record an event long remembered. But always, they are more than decoration. They are more than art. They are bridges. Bridges between generations, between the physical world and the world of the unseen. When one stands before such a pole, carved from red cedar or yellow, there is a stillness there, as though the wood listens as much as it speaks. The human world, in these carvings, touches the spiritual softly, like waves coming ashore beneath a long northern sky. The figures show animals, but also the faces of ancestors, the masks of old spirits, thunderbirds, beavers, ravens, and frogs. Each one chosen, not placed by accident, but guided by dreams and meaning, and the quiet counsel of elder voices. Some poles tell of creation, others of migration, some of great battles, or long journeys over ice and water. To touch the pole is not just to feel wood, but to feel the memory, the careful work of hands stilled long ago. The claws of a bear, the wings of an eagle, the eyes of the wolf, just parts of a language, carved instead of spoken. And when the wind moves through trees beside the pole, it seems to stir something deeper, as if the stories shift slightly, waiting to be heard again. Y. E. Each totem. Pole begins with a story, not carved in wood just yet, but one that lives quietly, inside the heart of a family or a clan. Some figures look fierce, but carry peace. Others smile gently, holding stories of change. In all of them, animal guides appear not just as beast or bird, but as spirit companions, shaping human life, guiding thought, whispering paths in silence. The making of a totem pole is never rushed. It unfolds slowly, like mist moving over tall mountain trees. It begins with thought, with remembrance, and with careful attention paid to the spirits of the natural world. Each animal selected for a totem carries deep meaning, chosen not for decoration, but for the traits it holds, the stories it tells, and the guidance it offers. The eagle, sharp-eyed and silent in its watchfulness, is often placed atop the pole, representing vision and clarity. It is the animal who flies closest to the heavens, a messenger between worlds. Then there is the bear, strong and steady, a symbol of protection and healing. Its place on a totem signifies leadership and the courage to stand firm. The wolf walks patiently through these stories too, reminding the people of loyalty, cooperation, and the wisdom of the pack. Some totems include the raven, clever and curious, the keeper of transformation. In many legends, the raven teaches through mischief, revealing truths through mystery. Orca whales may appear as well, guardians of memory and deep connection. They travel through generations, their songs echoing across time. These animals are not chosen at random. Their presence is agreed upon through careful discussion. Elders reflect on dreams, on family roles, and on the qualities most needed in the times ahead. Each animal carries a particular spirit, not just symbolic, but sacred. It is said that their essence walks with the family, guiding them through hardship, celebrating with them in joy. There he found not mischief, but light. For the raven, with all its whispers and wild laughter, had hidden the sun inside a pine cone, and released it only when he saw someone worthy of carrying its warmth. Another speaks of a girl raised among wolves, who learned the language of wind and silence. She returned not less human, but more, with a deeper knowing of care and kinship. In stories passed down by the Haida, Tlingit, and Tsimshian peoples, each creature comes alive through tale and teaching. One story tells of a boy who followed a raven deep into the woods, drawn by its cry. Yet another tells of the beaver, who, through tireless effort, shaped the rivers and the forests, not only with its teeth, but with vision and reverence for flow. These stories are not simply told. They are lived. And as the wood is chosen for the pole, often red cedar, straight and clear-grained, the spirits are spoken to, invited in. Carvers do not act on skill alone. They also consult with the community, with elders, and with ancestors. The decision of which animal is placed where is not about hierarchy, but symbolism. Each figure is like a chapter in a living book. One carved feather at a time, one claw, one knowing eye. Paint is applied slowly, in colors drawn from the earth, black from charcoal, red and brown from ochre, blue from copper salt. Each touch deepens the presence of the animal represented, until it is not just an image, but a guardian watching silently from the wood. When the pole is complete, a raising ceremony follows. People gather, wrapped in blankets, holding drums in hand. The pole is honored with song, lifted with reverence, and never alone. It rises with the strength of many. And once it stands, it does not speak in words. But it does speak. It tells of ancestors, of trials weathered and joys shared. It reminds the children who they are, and the elders who they have always been. The animals there, they do not sleep. They keep their watch through storm and sun, through loss and reunion, keeping the stories alive, walking in spirit with all who belong to that pole. It starts in the stillness of the forest, where time moves at its own pace, quiet and undisturbed. To choose a tree is to listen for its spirit. Not just any tree will do. The keeper walks with patience, following old paths lined by moss and memory. When they find a tree, they do not act quickly. First, they sit beside it, letting the sun warm their back, letting the breeze whisper through its branches. They observe its shape, its growth, its harmony within the space around it. They listen. Sometimes it takes days, other times weeks. A true keeper does not rush. If the tree is ready, if it offers itself freely, then the making can begin. But before anything is taken, there is a moment of reverence, a quiet word, or a gentle offering placed at the base. Leaves or ash or small carvings once made return to the earth. The keeper thanks the tree, and only then does the first cut begin. They use tools passed through generations, wooden-handled adzes, stone blades bound with sinew and care. Some have carvings of their own, subtle marks to guide the user's hand. The tree falls not with violence, but with dignity. Once brought to the village or carving site, the trunk is cleaned gently, its bark removed in long, graceful strips. The wood begins to change, slowly, shaped not by machines, but by skilled hands, guided by touch and memory. Bit by bit, the figure inside the wood emerges. Some see the keeper as the maker, but elders say the totem already exists. The keeper simply reveals what is already there. Each tap of a tool, each brush of the hand, is a conversation. They shape the face of an ancestor, or a crest animal with equal care. Eyelids are smoothed, wings are drawn along the grain, claws are added with steady patience. It is a quiet art, not just of wood, but of listening and letting go. When the final stroke is made, the carving enters a new phase. Before it can stand, before it can be given to its place in the world, a blessing must be shared. The ritual is calm, inward, not always done before many eyes. The keeper brings water from a sacred spring and brushes it gently across the surface. Sometimes they press their forehead to the wood, murmuring names of the old ones. Feathers may be tied, or ropes of cedar bark. Driftwood ashes, perhaps, sprinkled at the base. There is no single way, only the spirit of offering. When the totem is complete, it is no longer a mere carving. It holds memory, intention, presence, and the keeper, like the tree before, lets go. Their task is not to own, but to awaken. In the quiet hours of twilight, a new voice stands tall, and the forest breathes with it once more. The fire burns low in the hearts of old stories. But it never fades. Among the stones and trees, where footsteps have passed for generations, there are those who carry tales like lanterns in the dusk, the hum of a sacred song, the rhythm of a tale repeated beside fires. These were more than entertainment. They were instruction, connection, and memory. Totems carved of bone, wood, or stone were not idle trinkets. They were vessels, each line etched into their surface, each pattern shaped by the hands of ancestors, held deep meaning. Symbols of the animals they honored, spirits they revered, and the lessons they carried. To the totem keeper, each detail mattered. Not just the story, but how it was told, when it was told, and in whose presence. Voices were modulated gently, pauses placed with purpose, gestures passed down over many winters. They are the elders, the guardians of lore. Their knowledge is not written on scrolls or carved into tablets. Instead, it flows from voice to ear, from heart to heart. These are the totem keepers. Each clan, each gathering of kin, would trust a chosen few to remember. Being chosen as a keeper was not a position of ego, but of great humility, a trust given to preserve without altering, and to release the story only when it was time. Some tales were shared each season, others only once in a life. Responsibility fell not only on memory, but on conduct. The keeper must live in harmony with the law, or risk letting the story falter. It was said that a story misremembered was like a bird with a broken wing. It might touch the air, but it would never truly soar. So elders trained their minds not just to remember, but to feel. They knew the tones of reverence, of caution, of boundless joy. They could trace stories through the decades like familiar footpaths. Sometimes, in the hush of twilight, a child would sit across from one of these elders, eyes wide, listening as the story wove itself into the stars. And in that moment, even if they did not yet understand, something in them would stir, a seed. So the tradition continued, voice by voice, moment by moment, not hurried, not forced, but steady as breath. Totems were cared for like elderkin, polished, tended, repaired with reverence. Some were wrapped in bark cloth, others kept in sacred hollows of ancestral trees. Each clan had their customs, their rhythms. The totem was more than symbol. It was the presence of those who came before. When the keeper touched it, it was with clean hands and full heart. And when a story was told, the totem bore silent witness. In this way, time was held together, the old walked beside the young, and silence, between words, became as meaningful as the tale itself. There was no rush to complete a story, no pressure to modernize it. Its stillness was its power, and the ones who bore it carried that stillness with them. They knew the sacred lives in the quiet between thoughts. In every village perched at the edge of a forest, or nestled close to a river's bend, there is usually a figure who carries more than just their own story. The elder. Perhaps it is a grandmother whose voice hums like wind through the trees, or an old man with hands etched like bark, both weaving tales from memory as easily as breath. These elders are more than just people of age. They are the living libraries of their communities. Before writing found its way into every corner of the world, the village elder held the thread. Stories passed not on paper, but from tongue to ear, again and again. They would sit beneath the blue dusk sky, or beside the fire when the nights grew long, and speak of animals with eyes that held the past, of stones that remembered footsteps, of mountains that once walked. The young would gather close, not just to hear, but to hold, to carry these stories onward. Many of those stories aligned deeply with the carvings on the community's totems. Lights dimmed, and the flicker of memory flickered with it. You see, each totem figure is not just a symbol, it is a chapter, a spoke on the wheel of a tale. The bear might be the guardian of fire, the raven, the bringer of daylight, the frog, the connector across worlds. Totem figures served as solid reminders of the stories shared in the dark, bold shapes that could not fade the way a voice might. They were memory made visible. When a child passed by the totem, catching it in the corner of their eye, they'd recall, elders' voices echoing slow and low. In villages without written language, the totems anchored the oral traditions. They bore the motifs, the legends, the ancestors. And with each spiral carved or eye painted, it was more than art. It was repetition, the companion of memory. When you repeat a name or a story, when you speak a tale over and over, the mind makes room for it. It nests. A well-told story becomes air, the kind that slips between generations more easily than anything inked on parchment. And all around the totems, that air was thick. Above him, an orca, its tail sweeping upward, said to carry the spirits of the lost out to sea. Then, a thunderbird, wings outstretched, and the elder sitting beside you says, "Long ago, when people whispered secrets to the birds, the thunderbird listened most closely." The shape of each creature recalls the tale. Imagine sitting at the base of a tall cedar totem, your back against its cool bark, your eyes tracing each figure above, the wolf at the bottom. Fierce but protective, said to be the one who taught humans how to form packs, the tail anchors the figure. It breathes in speech. It holds shape and symbol. And so the oral thread continues. Every story told is a strand, and each totem a knot that keeps it from unraveling. And even now, long after the first stories were spoken, elders still gather, still speak, perhaps now beneath electric lights, perhaps beside a heater rather than a fire. Together, Image and word build a twin path through time. This is how knowledge lives when it is not written. But still, the thread moves on. The totem pole, once carved in a forest of memory and reverence, has always offered more than just shapes on wood. It has breathed story into shadowed bark and offered voice to stillness. But time does not forget to move forward. With colonization came pressure to silence these stories, and in many places, totem poles were seen as relics of a past that settlers couldn't understand. But as years folded into decades, a quiet spark began to return. Revitalization. Gentle, determined, took root in indigenous communities. Elders, remembering the feel of carving tools passed from hand to hand, began again to teach young artists, holding cedar blocks in. Fingers that had learned digital lines, traced back into their histories with care and reverence, and totem poles rose once more, not always in the same shapes as before, sometimes layered with deeper meanings, both old and new. Some were taken, removed from their homelands, displayed in cold museums, far from the lands that gave them meaning. Others were left to decay. The ones that survived did so in silence, as many communities were discouraged, or even forbidden, to carve them again. Some poles now stand in city spaces, their stories reaching toward the sky beside tall metal towers. Some are carved in schools, where children sit cross-legged and listen to the stories as they unfold. Others are more subtle, wall-sized murals or finely carved jewelry, honoring the spirit of the pole in a modern pulse. The adjustments made to traditional totem use haven't always come easily. They required gentle compromise, thoughtful evolution. Some elders welcome these changes, seeing in them a survival of meaning. Others worry that the symbolism may fade under new interpretations, but there is beauty in this careful blending, a weaving of heritage into the world of now. Narratives shift gently, like leaves shifting in a breeze, yet the roots remain intact. Some contemporary carvers have introduced figures that represent modern experiences, caregivers, protesters, scholars, all taking their place beside thunderbirds and wolves. These are not replacements, but additions, balanced between generations. The poles are becoming stories not only of where people came from, but of where they are going. The tree becomes a bridge between time, its fibers holding the knowledge of the old forest while reaching toward the changing light of the present. Carvings, once silenced, speak again, and their voices are not echoes, but lullabies of belonging. Every notch made in cedar, every pigment laid soft upon its grain, is an act of story-keeping, an offering from past to future, and the totem pole stands. In carving these new poles, communities reclaim what was nearly lost, and in doing so, they remind the world that traditional knowledge is not frozen in the past. It is living, breathing, and growing strong. Still, but never static. Filled with stories, old and new, waiting quietly in the hush of the evening air. The ebb and flow of the tides carries more than salt and sea foam. It carries story, memory, and quiet resistance. As colonial powers swept across continents, the legacy of indigenous totemic traditions faced a storm unlike any before. Totems, once standing openly beneath the sky, beside the forests or facing the waves, now became targets of erasure. Missionaries and colonial administrators, viewing these carved sentinels through alien eyes, spoke of idols, of superstition, of something to be dismantled, to be hidden, or burned. But to the people who carved them, these were not just wood or stone. They were community markers, ancestral voices, truths told in stillness. Their suppression was not only physical, but cultural, spiritual, a silencing that ran deep. Laws were passed, ceremonies forbidden, totem poles taken from villages, sometimes sold, sometimes seized. In places like the Pacific Northwest, families found entire legacies taken away. Not just the poles themselves, but the right to carve them, raise them, or speak their names aloud. Some indigenous communities, under risk of punishment, painted their totems in soot and soil, blending them into bark, hiding them in forests where only the old paths led. Others committed the forms to memory, tracing the curve of each animal's back in their dreams, until there, children were old enough to hold the shapes within them. Yet, beneath the silence, the stories waited. Carvers passed their knowledge quietly, not through public displays, but in whispers, in wood chips falling silently from small hidden glades. There were songs, too, sung softly at night, or hummed beneath breath. Each melody a lifeline slung between generations, woven with names of creatures and spirits no colonial law could erase. In time, the resistance became a rhythm, patient, like the tide. And just as no wave forgets the shore, these communities did not forget their forms. Even when they could not raise new poles, they taught the old ones to the youngest hearts. A raven becomes more than a bird, an eagle more than a memory. Hidden to an outside world, these emblems remained alive, tucked into lullabies, shadowed carvings, dances that mimed the past in the stillness of night. To outsiders, it may have seemed that totems had vanished, but inside homes and minds, the carvings continued, invisible knives shaping futures. And now, as awareness stirs once more, and hands begin again to carve in daylight, we remember what so many never forgot. Totems are not only symbols of identity, they once stood tall among the cedars and firs, carved from trees that had listened to centuries of wind and rain, listening still as the tools shaped them with care and intent. Totem poles, reaching toward the sky, bearing the stories and spirits of generations, each figure, chosen with reverence, each symbol tied to family, memory, place. They are survival in artful form. They are lives held in balance, through years of silence and moments of quiet making. And even in times of forced forgetting, the law finds a way to remain. But there came a time, not so long ago, when those figures were cut down, removed, carried away. In schools not of their choosing, taught in languages not their own, the sacred stories began to fade. Names were reshaped, replaced, family lines redrawn without consent. And with each missing pole, each missing tale, a link was lost. A quiet, aching space grew between the living and the ancestors, some to museums, some to private collections, some simply locked away in basements far from where they belonged. Their silence echoed in children's voices, children raised without knowing what the eagle meant to their clan, or what the bear stood for in their lineage. I think of a child looking up at a bare clearing where once a pole stood, eyes scanning the treetops, searching for something. They do not yet know they are missing. There was no ceremony when the poles were taken, no songs to guide them on their forced journey, just silence machines, and distant hands. And yet, in that loss, something tender remained. The memory of standing beside elder wood, the whisper of raven wings in dreams, the longing that flickers behind quiet eyes. In that stillness, there has always been something waiting. Not sleeping, but watching, remembering. Even when the carvings were absent, the meanings lingered in gestures, in lullabies, in tucked-away sketches of animals and shapes no longer spoken of aloud. In some households, a whispered name would pass between generations. A clan crest spoken like a sigh before sleep. Unable to be unremembered completely, I picture the firelight catching on a small carving, no taller than a hand, shaped with whatever tools could be found, held close by someone whose heart carried stories their voice was no longer allowed to tell. These small acts, these silent symbols, kept something alive. A thread stretched gently through time. It never snapped. Not quite. Though the poles were gone, though the platforms were empty, the meanings remained in quiet hearts. Waiting. The pulse of legacy beats louder in the hands of those who carve with memory. Across quiet stretches of northwest shoreline, in still workshops warmed by cedar smoke, a new generation of hands is rising. Young carvers, some who once wandered far from the paths of their ancestors, now find themselves gently pulled back by something deeper than intention, a longing, perhaps, or a song passed through wood and whisper. Totem carving, once veiled by time, is being reawakened. Not as a relic, but as a rhythm that lives. Communities once fractured are beginning to mend, not quickly, but with patient strength. Elders sit beside students, offering stories with every stroke of the blade, not only how, but why. Each figure shaped tells more than a tale. It holds an echo, listening for the moment when someone would remember how to speak their shapes again. The raven appears again, not only as a trickster, but as a teacher. The bear returns, not just for might, but for healing. These are not just carvings, they are roots growing upward. They offer themselves willingly, back in the city, in wide halls brushed with soft light. Museums once silent are learning to speak again. Not with labels, but with listening. Curators now walk with culture bearers, side by side, not steps apart, totem poles that once stood as decoration, now stand as conversation. In many villages, young people are no longer asking, "Who am I?" They are carving their identity into the very grains of the old trees. And those trees returned to the communities that first gave them life, not removed from glass cases with ceremony, but with care. In the coastal rain, under skies that often hold both mist and sun, the wood speaks again. One young artist, her hands steady with concentration, leans over the beginning of a totem. She works slowly, knowing that every choice, every cut of the adze must be guided by both tradition and truth. She doesn't speak much as she carves. Some museums offer carving programs, co-led by indigenous artists. Some offer space, allowing voices that were once silenced to echo softly again. It is not about ownership anymore. It is about stewardship, relationship, renewal. But in her silence, you can feel the vibration of revival. The form line opens, the eye takes shape, the mouth curves into a quiet song. Outside her workshop, the trees grow older, reaching higher into clouds. Inside, New hands grow wiser, reaching further into their past. From these hands, the poles of tomorrow begin, and they carry more than memory. They carry the shape of what resilience looks like when it is kept alive in beauty and given back, again and again, to the land that first gave voice to the trees. Gruh. And so, under the soft hush of shadows and starlight, we have come to the edge of this quiet trail. Throughout our journey, we have followed ancient paths, rested beneath stories carved in wood and stone, and listened to the hush between words. There is something still, something gentle, about knowing the watchers remain. Totems, patient and still. They do not sleep, and yet they do not wake in the way we do. Their eyes are open to time's slow rhythm, their limbs carved by ancestral hands, hands that understood silence and memory. These figures, tall and quiet, do not ask for attention. They do not speak aloud, yet their presence echoes something deep, something settled. They are forms made from the bones of trees, from the breath of stories passed down like lullabies, symbols of spirit and of kin, wrapped in the wear of wind and softened by seasons, they stand. They guard not with force or fire, but with memory, with presence, and with peace. You might hear a breeze draw around their shapes, a gentle reminder that something older than sound still speaks, no matter where we go, no matter what becomes of towers or cities or time itself. These guardians remain, not as relics but as roots, bridges from living bark to green sky. Perhaps tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, you feel that stillness nearby, a sense that someone or something is looking out from the threshold of now and always, not watching. You. They may tilt under snow, or shimmer under the sun, but they endure. Some totems mark the passage of old joy, others sorrow, some hold names, while others hold silence. And still they wait, watchful, but never watching, but holding space, so that in this moment you may rest, as those before us often have, protected not by walls, but by the grace of presence and the patience of spirit. Let the watchers stand, tall as quiet mountains, old as sleep itself, their arms etched with the breath of generations, their gaze settled gently on the horizon. Forever calm, forever still. They will be here tomorrow, and long beyond tonight. May you sleep well beneath their gaze, shielded by symbols you do not need to understand, only trust. The watchers do not dream, but you can. And in their silence, they offer you space to wander and to rest. Soft night surrounds you now, wrapped gently in spirit and sky. Let your breath slow, let the distant echoes fade, and drift, lightly, quietly, fully,